Minnesota, parity and freedom from the land of 10,000 lakes.
All right, welcome to Minnesota Liberty. We are on episode number 7, which, as I mentioned last week, is the magic episode for podcasts. You know that we're in this for the long haul if we've reached episode 7. So here we are. Rebecca, welcome back.
Hi, how's it going?
Glad you're feeling better. Tonight we are excited to bring. So last week I had it was just me and Charlie, the outgoing chair, and now we've got our new chair, Marianne Stebbins, and I will bring her in. Marianne, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
All right. Well, so we just kind of wanted to talk. I don't have a whole lot of bullet points or questions prepared. I don't think Rebecca came with much either. And so you guys are kind of my bosses at this point. Rebecca, you're the vice chair. Marianne, as chair. And I know, boss is not the right word.
The members are our bosses.
That's
Is
true.
there a boss in the Libertarian Party? I'm just asking.
I feel like we kind of all are. But you guys are steering the ship, and that's important. So welcome. I'm so glad that the three of us are together. Kind of just to talk. So Marianne, before we get into your vision for the party and all that stuff, why don't you kind of give us a backstory of where you came from and why we kind of coalesced around you as chair and that kind of thing.
Well, I was a Republican my whole life up until this past December. Well, marginally a Republican. I've always been a libertarian at heart. But I worked in the Republican Party for 3 decades, put in a lot of work and a lot of heartache, because the harder I worked, seemed the more the Republicans voted against liberty. So I think what really got to me, well, let's shoot back. What is it? 15 years now. I first heard Ron Paul was running for president back in January of 2007. And I thought, oh my God, finally there's somebody running for president I can support. And so I jumped in with everybody else, the Ron Paul forums. We were all grassroots. We were, going out and waving signs and, doing whatever we could, because if there was any chance in hell that Ron Paul could become president, we were going to do whatever we could for that. So the national campaign got in touch with me, and I asked if I wanted to head up the Minnesota effort. And of course, I was going to do everything I could. So I said, sure. And we had a fantastic little team back in 2008. 2008, those were the hardcore. Those were the true believers. So couldn't be prouder of that group. But we had minimal success in 2008. We were just getting started, but we did elect some delegates to the national convention. And at the same time the national convention was going on, that was here in Minnesota in 2008. So we held the Rally for the Republic over at the Target Center while the RNC, the Republican National Convention, was going on over in St. Paul. And we had 10,000 people turn out there. And so at that point, we were just getting going. Fast forward a couple of years, and yes, he's running again. And so we were thrilled. And James, I know you were in on that as well in 2012. But we were ready in 2012. Everything that went wrong in 2008, which partly was because we just didn't have enough people at the time, but also the Republican Party of Minnesota, they just really stomped on our state delegates. So our people were, they were ready to go in 2012. And God, I couldn't be prouder of those people. We had a great plan, fantastic strategy, redundancies, backup plans, everything in place. But the real magic of it was that everybody did their job. So right down to the precinct captains. And it was really a bottom-up strategy. It was the precinct captains owned their precincts. They were responsible for winning their precincts. Yes, we did target precincts and BPOUs so that we could, elect on up to the congressional district and state conventions to win those national delegates. But I'll tell you what, you don't have a more intelligent group of people than Ron Paul supporters. So we took 14% support statewide into winning 33 out of the 40 national delegates. And we did go to the national convention in 2012, and we were proud to put forward our 33 votes. Now, the secretary of the RNC didn't actually read our votes, but we were on record, on national TV. They could see that, Ron Paul did win Minnesota. And I stuck with the GOP a few more years. I did end up running for state representative in 2020, and just, man, the party was still pretty pissed at me.
Really?
Personally. Oh yeah, my BPOU chair, she just really had a grudge against me still at that point. And in 2020, because of COVID, they didn't actually have conventions. They did this on Zoom, and I'm not going to go into all those details, but tell you what, it was at that point I knew there was no future for me in the GOP. So it took a couple of years to make the official jump, but I couldn't be happier. I'm home now in the Libertarian Party. I am thrilled to be here. I don't feel like I have to hide my views. Not that I did a very good job of it before, but I couldn't be happier to be here in the Libertarian Party. And then I'll let you pick it back up. That's in the Republican Party, I did everything. I was BPOU chair. I was on convention committees, the state convention, and ran the state fair booth, and, did all sorts of things for the GOP over 30 years, and had little thanks for it. So again, I'm just happy to be here in the Libertarian Party.
That 2012 GOP state convention was, I happened to get seated. I was an alternate, and it was just the most exhilarating experience of my young adult life. And I've kind of enjoyed being in the LP, which is slightly lower stakes, I guess, but still just as fun for me personally. But I'm really excited about your vision for the party to kind of bring us a little bit less low stakes, I guess. Can you talk a little bit about what you have planned for the next year or two?
Yeah. Now, remember, I was running for political director, so that's where I was coming in. With what I would love to see us do in 2024 is elect one libertarian to the state legislature, and on one hand, that seems ambitious, given our track record. On the other hand, it may seem minimal to a lot of people, but what do we hear when we are talking to people, whether they are on the edge of the Republican Party or on the edge of the Democrat Party, or whether they're just independents? They say, when we say, come join us in the Libertarian Party because you agree with us, they say, well, you guys can't win. And that's our first step. We're going to prove them wrong on that. With just one libertarian candidate elected to the state legislature, if you ever watch those proceedings on the Senate or the House floor, you see those boards light up, they're all green. Well, right now, the Senate is in session and they have their omnibus bills that they're putting forward. We have, the elections committee omnibus bills when we're watching right at this moment, because they are going to be voting potentially on an amendment. Let's backtrack. I don't know, James, if you have talked about the effort to increase the threshold to become a major party from 5% to 10%.
Rebecca, did we cover that in a previous episode?
Yeah, with Chip.
Was
that with Chip
Okay.
Taman?
Yeah. Okay. So the audience is familiar broadly with the shenanigans they're trying to pull last month, or whenever it was.
Yeah. Well, and right now the Senate has a replacement amendment that we are hopeful for, which would which would require the state chair of a political party to certify any candidates. And I'm told by one of our friends who was a Ron Paul guy, who is now a state senator, that this amendment to have state party chairs certify their candidates would replace the increased threshold. So we're hopeful for that. It would still have to go to conference committee because the House did pass the provision to increase the threshold from 5% to 10%, which would be, I mean, 5% is already pretty daunting for us, but 10% would be even more difficult. But I would not give up on that, because shoot back to Ron Paul, with very few resources and with minimal support, we were able to turn that into a win through strategy. So getting back to my vision, I think through focused strategy that we can elect one or more potentially, but we really want to focus our efforts into the most potential districts. But I do think we can win that one. And what I was getting to is, if you ever watch the proceedings on the House or the Senate floor, you see that board light up all green, because nobody has the guts to ever vote against, the omnibus bills, against farmers, against children, education, all these things. So we would love to see that board light up in green and have that one red dot. That's our big libertarian there, because that is going to demonstrate what a libertarian, how a libertarian would vote. But I think more importantly, just for the naysayers out there, it would show that, yes, libertarians can win. Then we can overcome that objection. And I think once we get that first win in the legislature, we'll see more people coming over to us once they've seen that we can win. And then in 2026, that's when I would like to see us, actually win that majority status. And there are a variety of, there are a couple of ways we can do that, of course. Right now, it would be through achieving that 5%. But another method would be to actually have, there's a number by statute, and I think it's 43 House candidates, and then another number of Senate candidates. And I think that is also possible. Our speed bump there is in the petitioning process. So what I would like to do to that end is have us raise the money, and doing this through, a lot of major donors, sure, by putting forth a prospectus as to what we will be doing with their money. And what we would be doing essentially with that money would be hiring paid petitioners. That has always been an issue for the Libertarian Party, is, taking those 2 weeks that we have to achieve enough petition signatures for statewide candidates, in addition to any legislative candidates that we want to run. So that is my personal goal over the next 2 years, roughly, is to raise enough money so that we can pay volunteers. I have both our volunteers and paid petitioners to achieve candidate access to the ballots for enough legislative candidates so that we can become a major party at that point.
Yeah, I know that the party has been kind of hesitant to spend money on like almost anything in the past. So that's kind of refreshing to hear that we'll be spending money wisely. Although, I did float a very a small spend earlier, and you were able to secure a volunteer for that. So I know that you're not just going to be profligate with the checkbook, which is also good. Rebecca, yeah.
I'm a tightwad.
Rebecca, I'm going to let you ask questions because you're the co-host, but right now you're also the vice chair. So I'm going to take co-host prerogative and ask you some questions as well. So you were also running for chair, and you graciously accepted the nomination for vice chair. And thank you for doing that, because we do need that representation on the board from outstate Minnesota. How will you use your position to kind of further the interests of libertarians in sort of the more rural areas, given that we've been sort of a cities focused party hitherto?
Well, I think out here, people are more likely to listen to somebody who is just a fellow Rocks and Cows. I feel like I say that a lot lately, but I mean, that's kind of like people out here have just kind of embraced that. And as that's kind of become, Northern Minnesota, outstate Minnesota, like part of our identity, So once that was said, everybody was just like, oh yeah, that's totally what we are. It's true. So, out here, there's a big disconnect between city people and rural people. I recognize that so out, people are going to be more likely to listen to a fellow rural person, right? That can not only talk about politics, but we can talk about our cows, we can talk about, our tractors, whatever you want to talk about, there's a different type of personality that does well together. And I would really like to see, we started the Beltrami affiliate up here in 2021. And it was just kind of like one of those things where, when something is meant to be, when it happens so easily and so quickly, and the right people just kind of come together, and then all of a sudden, like, bam, we've got something going on. And that's what happened with that. But before there was the Beltrami affiliate, there was nothing up here. And so for a long time, I'd been watching like the Libertarian Party do stuff and, but there wasn't an easily accessible door to get into the party and get involved, simply for a lack of representation up here. So there wasn't anybody I could just like call on the phone and be like, hey, or, like at events, go up to a booth and talk to people, because there was nothing like that. So us having kind of that foot in the door and be able to hear about, small town meetings, small town things that you don't know about until almost like the day or two before they happen, because things that pop up very quickly, it just and spread by word of mouth, and that's how you're able to show up. So, for instance, when the gun control bills were going through, the legislation process and all the hearings and all that kind of stuff, we had a 2 days notice that there was going to be a meeting at the Eagles Club. And so we showed up, but that's all it was. It was a 48-hour notice, showed up, but it was a packed room, right? And so then there was this public meeting about the gun control bills and, because there was a lot of concerned people. But through being able to like just hear about that and hearing about that word of mouth meant that we were able to go there. And I was able to talk, which was nerve-wracking because the Beltrami GOP was also there. Anyways, there's a whole history behind that also. But because it was their meeting. And so I was able to be like, get the mic and be like, I'm representing the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. And, we're also watching this. And anyways, just by mentioning the Libertarian Party of Minnesota, there was reactions by people in the room, just kind of generalized of just like, yay, those kinds of things, So people are watching, people are paying attention. There's a lot of, around presidential campaigns, with whoever the Libertarian Party wants as a presidential candidate. So there's going to be a lot more attention around it then. But I don't remember where I was going with that. Sorry. But just being able to be able to talk to people and then be able to come and talk to me afterwards. And that happened after that meeting, just by mentioning, I'm from the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. I'm representing them. And after the meeting, people were coming and talking to me and trying to find out information. So that's being able to be up here and be present and be active and hear about these little things makes it possible for us to grow out here. And like I said, this is meetings that aren't going to show up on a calendar or any of that kind of stuff. People out here are it's very different than the cities. So it's a lot of, small talk and gossip and, things move like that, like wildfire, but that's how you hear about it, but you won't know unless you're here.
Awesome. Marianne, where do you think that one candidate's going to come from? Do you have any ideas?
I have not taken the time yet to analyze the districts. So it's going to be running hard cold numbers, but then it's also going to be, intuiting, in addition to, where the Republicans and Democrats are coming down, also kind of intuiting where the most libertarian areas are. And outstate is, that's going to be your libertarian people, but there's also in the city, Minneapolis, there's a libertarian edge as well. There are different flavors of libertarianism. Your rocks and cows are going to be your more conservative libertarians, and your metro is going to be your more lefty libertarians. So I don't have an answer for you yet. It's going to be, me sitting down and taking a few days just to go through that. And we have other resources we could look at as well, but I just don't have an answer for you yet, but I think we can focus strategically and to come up with that one winner. Yeah, we are going to have to run a few. But I think, by doing that, picking our, maybe 3 to 5, 6 most likely legislative districts, focusing our volunteer efforts, focusing, any paid work, that we think we can afford, into those areas. And then as the election proceeds, we may have to update that based on what we're seeing and further focus those resources into, maybe 2 to 3 of them. It's going to be fluid. We'll have to roll with it. And a lot of that's going to also depend on where do we have good candidates. So we have to look for the matchups between those good candidates that fit the district, and where we think our most potential wins could be. And, we'll have to look at the incumbents and where are they weak. If they're outstate and they're anti-gun, for example, that's something we look at. So there's not a cut and dried answer to that.
Cool. Rebecca, I want to let you chime in if you want, if you have any questions or whatever. If not, I'm going to ask Marianne about that poster behind her. All right, Marianne. So for those listening to the audio feed, there is a poster behind you of Lysander Spooner, who is my biggest influence when it comes to like straight up philosophy. I just think he's fantastic. I think he's like the picture of the perfect 19th century American. He was an abolitionist who also supported secession, and like just saw the government for what it was, even at that sort of Pollyanna-ish age where like, everybody was just, so gung-ho about this new thing that they had created. What's the significance of Spooner to you?
Well, I mean, the funny thing about this poster, though, my son, he works for conservative organizations, and he just graduated from college about a year ago. So he was living here, and he was on Zoom calls all the time. So he had a place, I moved it, but he had a place where he always did Zoom calls. So I put this up behind his as a backdrop to him. He didn't notice it for a couple times, but I thought that was kind of funny because, it is working with conservative organizations. I don't know if they knew who he was or not, but fortunately my son moved out a little bit after that, so I moved it over here. I mean, that's the cute story to it. I don't know if he's, permanently scarred from that or not, but.
That's awesome. Well, I do love Spooner. I was tempted to do, I haven't always been the comms director, but I have been on the social media team for a while. And I was really tempted to do just like Spooner Day on Twitter for the LPMN. Although I thought better of it after a while, but I have all these Spooner memes and stuff. And maybe I'll write up something for the blog just because I do. He's just a huge inspiration to me. Next to Ron Paul, he's probably my favorite like pseudo libertarian, I guess. Thinker.
I totally would have worn the sweatshirt with him on it to the LPMN convention.
That's all right. We had buttons. All right. So here's something. So there was also Kara Schultz, who was she was running for chair and kind of surprised everybody, including you apparently, by refusing the nomination and we ended up electing her political director, which is a great position for her. But she wanted to do, as part of her kind of chair campaign, she was going to do a board retreat. And you're picking that up, and I think it's a tremendous idea. Mm-hmm. What's in store for the board as we kind of go into this sort of day of communing together.
Yeah. Well, and I want to pick up on the best ideas of everybody. So Rebecca had a lot of great outreach ideas, and Kara had this board retreat, and I think it's so that we don't have to go into our board meetings, just on the fly, with people bringing up particular issues. But I think the board retreat is for us to really define our goals, and then, at least define some broad steps that we want to take, which we can discuss in a more relaxed setting, instead of just trying to do these within an hour or two on a board meeting. So it's to define our broad vision, some of the things I brought up. But then also, we want to hear from the communications team. We want to all be on the same page so that we're all working in the same direction. I would also like to, in addition to the board meeting, have the board, have work sessions in advance so that when we do come to a board meeting, we're not spending all of our time, discussing and answering questions. So we already have those questions answered. So we have, well-formed proposals that we can, briefly discuss and take votes. So something more. So I think Kara comes from it because she's on the city council. So I think she has been working in an environment where I think they do have, an annual retreat like that. And then they have their work sessions so that when they come into the city council, they have, firm proposals with answers and so forth. So, I see this as being very valuable for us to define our greatest missions and then some broad outlines as to how we're going to accomplish those.
Cool. So I know you're going to be meeting with our LNC representative, Mark Tunjevich, right after this. And historically, Minnesota and the LNC, or the National Party broadly, haven't really mixed. It's not that we're hostile towards them. Some of us are. It's just that we don't really we don't ask for help from their candidate support committees. We don't you're Charlie's predecessor, so Chris Holbrook, and he won't take this as an insult or anything like that. He just didn't care about national at all. And so his executive director was the representative to the LNC's region and that kind of thing. How do you anticipate working with the National Party? Are you going to be more involved with them? Do you think that they're a separate entity, so I'm not going to deal with them at all, or maybe somewhere in the middle? How do you anticipate that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, they're not a separate entity. Obviously, when we have a presidential candidate, we are all on the same page, working for that. I have not given it a lot of thought yet. I haven't had much interaction with the national yet. As you know, I've known I was going to be chair for about a week and a half now. So I knew, I guess, for less than 24 hours before I became chair. Right now, my eyes are on Minnesota, because that's where we can have an effect. And that's where my goals are, for what we want to accomplish. The time is going to come when we'll be working with national. That's fine. And obviously, once we're into the presidential election, we're all on one page there. But just for right now, I've had to focus my brain onto what we're going to accomplish here, if that answers the question.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And Chris's slogan, and this, I've come to find out that he didn't make it up, but he's the first person I ever heard say it. Was not our monkeys, not our circus, and he would always just say that about national. Which I feel like that's kind of a refreshing attitude to take, especially when it comes to some of the drama that was going on, or still might be. I don't know. Although it seems like the LNC is kind of flattening out as far as some of those divisions go. So that's good to hear.
Let's hope so. Yeah.
Sorry, did you need to say something?
Oh, I just said let's hope so, because we all just need to be working together. Divisions that's the nature of politics. It is. Happens in every party, Republican Party, Democrats, divisions all over the effing place. So, and I know that's been here too, but I'm hoping that we're going to just all be keeping our eyes on our goals. I think there were just personality conflicts. so far, I'm encouraged, and I hope you guys are too, because I'm really excited. We have so much talent on this board. If you want to separate out into, I don't know what you want to call it, Mises and not, the board's pretty mixed that way. But it seems like we all have the same goal. So I'm encouraged right now about that.
Yeah. Rebecca and I are both Mises, actually. Although, I'm a little bit more out front about my Misesness, I guess. But yeah, when we were kind of strategizing, one of the big priorities that we had was, putting up people who were going to be team players and not just like the Mises representative on the board. And I think everybody kind of understood that going into this past convention, that we were going to be a lot more diplomatic, because that to me anyway was kind of one of the mistakes that the Mises Caucus made last year. Was we just kind of ran roughshod over everything, and that doesn't serve anybody. It certainly doesn't serve us as a caucus. So and that's something that you and I actually talked about. Right after you joined the party, before you even were running for political director, you were running for at-large, and you said something like, you've been there, like you understand divisions and kind of how to navigate them. Although you did also say that you were kind of one of the radicals in the Republican Party, and so some of the more kind of old hands were resistant to you as well. And you mentioned that earlier. How do you think, given your experience there, how do you think you can help sort of bridge that gap, I guess, or bridge the divide is probably a better word to say.
I'm just not really paying attention to whether somebody has a big M on their head or a big whatever the other thing is. I'm looking at everybody as having individual talents. As libertarians, we recognize we're not members of a group, we're individuals. And that's how I'm looking at everybody. And everybody has something different to bring to the table. So we have so much talent that, you guys call yourself whatever you want. I'm calling us all libertarians. So yeah, there is a little bit of a balancing act going on, and I'm aware of all this, but I'm just trying to be sure everybody has a place at the table. And with Mises Caucus people understanding that, with people who aren't in Mises Caucus understanding that I'm trying to keep everybody together for as long as we can, and I hope indefinitely. I appreciate you all working with me as well, understanding that we're working for the same goal. So I just want to keep reminding people of that, and I don't think there's anything ideological that's a difference. It's just, I take it that Mises kind of formed potentially for ideological purposes, or because of differences with candidates and so forth. That's fine. But my goal and what I am trying to do is just keep everybody pointed in the same direction, so that within Minnesota, we can make gains for liberty.
I think that's much needed. Rebecca, you got any questions or anything lined up?
So one of the things that, like the party has been kind of lacking, in my opinion, is just that we have a number of divisions, and, James is the comms director, but we have other divisions too that have to be built essentially from the ground up, because there hasn't been a lot of attention, hasn't been a lot of work put into them. So what's kind of your, knowing that that's one of the things that we have to overcome, what would you like to see happen with those?
You brought up a lot of great things about outreach, and earlier you were just talking about the affiliates, or the outstate affiliates, certainly, and those affiliates are going to be just crucial to bringing people into the party. To kind of build on that, our data needs a lot of improvement every time we touch somebody out there. So Rebecca, if you're going to a GOP meeting and you have people coming up to you afterwards, or if you're out at the state fair, obviously, but out, at other events, we need to be capturing people whenever we touch them or whenever they touch us. So I know the IT team is going to be working on having an intake app that we can be running on tablets so that anybody out at events can be capturing that information. We aren't just our members. Yes, our members are the ones who elect the board. Our members, participate in a very integral way. But there are all these other people I mentioned before, the Republicans who are on the edge, of the party, all those independents out there, all those people who agree with us. Every time we touch them, we need to, I know, big data, we don't like it, but if they're willing to give us their contact information and they say, well, I want to be involved, they might not want to sign up for membership right then and there, but those people are still critical to what we're doing, because those people are the ones who, on legislation, they can be emailing their, reps and senators. On elections, obviously, we need everybody we need to know everybody who is willing to tell us they are interested in supporting libertarians. So there's going to be an aspect from the IT team where we're going to be beefing up and probably changing our database. And there's going to be, for outreach, for affiliates, there's going to be a method to bring those people into the party, even if they don't want to become official members. And we also want to support those affiliates, because the affiliates are the ones who know what's going on in their areas. Rebecca, you were talking about, all the meetings that we just don't have on the calendar, or we would have no way of knowing about. And that's where those affiliates are going to be absolutely critical. We need them up and running, somewhat autonomously. So as the state board, we want to support everything you're doing in that way. So outreach is going to be critical, and the IT department is going to be critical in different ways, but all coalescing. And obviously communications, James, so you're on top of that. So I think just with improvements in those three departments, we're going to be so far ahead, because we're going to know who we can be talking to, who we can be working with.
And we don't want to forget political as well, which...
No, obviously not political. I mean, we all support the whole board. Everything we're doing is supporting the political, because the political is the candidates and the elections, but also the legislation.
The work that Kara's been doing just the last couple of days, even, and not just Kara, like we have a whole ass group chat going to talk about this legislation that Senator Westland put up as sort of an alternative to that 10% rule that we were talking about earlier. Some of these just little tiny things that the senators, the politicians in general just don't really, they don't even understand. Like, that legal size paper thing that Chip testified to yesterday in the Senate. Who thought that the size of a piece of paper would really matter? But that's a huge thing. I mean, I'm not sitting here with legal size paper in my printer. I've got letter size paper, and if I'm going to go out and petition, then I would like to be able to just print it, right here in my office, rather than needing to go to FedEx or whatever.
And then if they can move that to electronic, that's leaps and bounds for us. A friend of mine, a Ron Paul guy, Cale Barr, who's a state senator now, we were messaging earlier today, because this is coming up to the Senate floor today. It's probably going on right now. But he wants to work with the Secretary of State's office to create a blockchain method for electronic signatures.
A Ron Paul guy talking about blockchain in the Secretary of State's office? That's a huge surprise. Wow.
Yeah. We did elect a few people out of the Ron Paul movement. So Cale Barr is one of those senators, and Gene Dornick was also a Ron Paul guy. He's a senator as well. So maybe those two are ones we could bring over, once we prove to them that we
that'd be really cool. If it seems like the pattern is, a Republican is getting primaried, or, they're a Republican in a blue district. So what the hell, I'll go ahead and convert to Libertarian, or they're retiring, or just whatever it is. Getting Libertarians actually elected is that's a really big hurdle. So, you know,
But you know what? Just one. I know it doesn't sound like much to, if you went out to a GOP thing and said, I want to elect one Republican, but to us, that's the leap. That's the quantum leap.
Well,
to
and
us.
Rebecca,
That's how we show people.
I figure, once you have like the one, and that's the foot in the door, and then it just starts taking off, like you said earlier, you that starts going faster and faster and faster. And right now, laying the groundwork for that to be able to happen is going to prop up everything else that happens in the future. So.
Yeah, Rebecca, you've talked about the sort of just how mismanaged and seemingly corrupt the state GOP is.
Yeah.
And I mean, you basically have said, look, they don't even deserve to be a party anymore.
No, I don't think they do.
I think is so it's hilarious. It's really funny that you bring that up because who thinks of the Republican Party as not being a party anymore? It's been around for 150 years.
Yeah, but I mean, the party of abolition. I mean, they've outlived their purpose, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
They're no longer they're no longer the party of freedom and, personal rights. And, it started out as, protesting slavery, but at this point now they're complicit with making us slaves to the system. Mm-hmm. At the very least, they're not able to hold back the onslaught of what is currently happening, which is almost just as bad.
I mentioned my primary in 2020. I did get beat out by the Republican there because the entire Republican Party came into my district, swooped in because I was the bloody red queen. They couldn't have me. As an aside, I think that helped Eric Mortensen get through because they started to ignore him because they were trying to beat me. But the guy I ran against, who is in the legislature now, he didn't win in 2020, but he won in 2022. He just voted to keep universal background checks in the omnibus bill. So, we've got Republicans out there voting against our gun rights, against all our liberties. So yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Well, the Beltrami GOP here in, our county, I ran for school board last election cycle, and I was the evil libertarian, which, I mean, if they'd sat down, had a conversation with me, they would have realized that actually we have a lot in common. But I think that mostly it was because they knew, I couldn't be sold. They weren't going to be able to buy me. They couldn't tell me what to do. And in response to that, they wrote down, published, and distributed publicly information that accused me of being a drug addict in a small town like Bemidji.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, I just, they're going to be the authors of their own destruction, and you can try to tell them, give them advice like, the guys, you can't do this, but they're not going to listen. So
let them push people to us. Fine.
Speaking of
school board, I actually did really well in that election. I think a lot of it was because of that. So.
Speaking of school board races, how do you both feel about this? The kind of the strategy of running in nonpartisan races or really focusing on those. Marianne, I'll let you start.
Sure. I mean, I think that's great. You can do a lot of libertarian things at a city council level. You can slide in under the radar. It helps us to build our bench team so that we do have people running at other levels. So I don't want to take anything away from that. I guess I still think we really need that one partisan win, with a libertarian. I want to see that in the state legislature because that's going to get notice. So a libertarian in the state legislature is not going to pass bills on their own. Whereas on the city council, they would be much more effective that way. So if you want to talk about tangible liberty, yeah, you're more likely to get that done on a city council level. And so I think that's just very important. But I still come back to getting that one libertarian in the legislature because that's where we're going to be noticed for an electoral success. And that's what's going to bring more people to us. So again, I think running local candidates, nonpartisan races is great. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But then there are different reasons for, having that libertarian partisan win.
Rebecca, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just so from running for school board, I realized by the time that the election cycle or the election was about to happen that I I was like, I didn't want it, mostly because school board's a little different than, say, something like city council. Like, they're not making decisions for the school district and then being able to influence the direction that the school district is going. And a lot of the problems in the school districts, in the public school, well, in all states, but maybe, I mean, especially here, it really need to be fixed at a legislative level. So they're just kind of following, they get the information down and they're enacting policy, but they're not directing policy. They're not like creating it, and so once I realized, like, and we're homeschoolers too. So, and so a little bit before in that, I went to school to be a teacher, realized that the school system was a complete mess. It was different than when I was a kid. Got out, quit my master's degree, and went to being a homeschooler. And so I've been homeschooling for the last 15 years. And once I started running for school board, it was like, this is a disaster. I couldn't do anything that the school districts absolutely needed by being a school board member. In fact, it might tie my hands and keep me from being able to make the influence, like the type of change that I see that they need, right? Because, you have that professionalism and, things that they expect from a school board member and all that kind of, I couldn't sit and talk out against public schools being a school board member.
Sure.
So it's kind of glad I was really glad going into the election that I didn't actually win. I was anyways, but those elections are important because for a small town, one of the reasons I think is I did as well as I did is just by being a community member and being active in the community and being present and part of these things that are going on. I realized I knew a lot of people. And so when you know people and you have a reputation and that reputation kind of surrounds who you are, so like trying to overcome like the small local elections are going to be easier to do because people know who you are. You're not just the crazy libertarian or whatever, but they know you by, what you've already accomplished, by how you treat them, by, just knowing like, oh, how's your kids doing, and knowing somebody by name, which is a benefit of those small town, the local nonpartisan elections. And then once you build up your background, then you're more likely to be able to, that reputation follows you and be able to overcome those larger elections. So that's what we need. We need people with good, solid reputations that have something to provide. People aren't going to vote on just hopes and dreams, generally speaking. So when we have something to,
unfortunately, they do too often.
Yeah, I suppose that is what Obama ran on. So, but when we have something we can provide, like this is what the libertarians have done. This is what, or people who are libertarians have accomplished. When you can hand them a set of accomplishments, they're going to be more likely to listen, in my opinion. So
I think
the nice thing is that a lot of most of the nonpartisan races are in off years. And so we don't really have to pick one or the other.
Yeah.
We can do both and keep our volunteers active, keep our candidates active.
I think so we get attacked from the left and the right. Like I've been called a fascist before from a leftist. But even beyond that, like both of those kind of wings think that libertarians have just been in control for decades. And that's why we're in the state that we're in. It's the free market that did all this. And like everybody every libertarian knows that we have nothing to do with a free market in the current economy. But whether it's nationalist Republicans who want to do trade protection because they want to protect the jobs and not import cheap Chinese crap or whatever, or the left who thinks that capitalism is the devil and the root of all of our problems. How do we dispel these myths? How do we show ourselves as not the party of the billionaires? I mean, it's really the Republicans and Democrats who for years have been creating billionaires just by virtue of their regulatory capture and stuff. How do we get around that or get past that and help people to see kind of reality for what it is?
And to some extent, we need to know our audience. So if we're running a libertarian in Minneapolis, we're going to talk about corporatism, and differentiate that from the free market. Whereas if you're running in the suburbs or outstate, you can talk about the free market. So a lot of that is, knowing your audience. But we could probably do, libertarians are so smart, aren't we? We're so smart, but we don't connect a lot of times with people. And Rebecca, you touched on this. A lot of times it's knowing you. It's they, if you come to their door, what matters more to them than the issues is that you care about them. That you're one of them, that you're a member of the community. So yes, we will, as candidates, want to debate this to some degree, but there is the old saw that in an election, you can do one of two things, but not both. In an election, you can either educate or you can win. And a lot of times as libertarians, we're more interested in not understanding the voters so much as in telling the voters what our point of view is. So I think we can get better on that, just as libertarians in general, but as candidates. So James, that's in your communication team's bailiwick. But I think that's something we should, just spend a little time on, and discussing how we are presenting issues, because we can say, we can tell them the truth, but in framing it properly, depending on what your audience is.
Rebecca, anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I think you pretty much just, the individual, when people are seen as an individual, whether they believe in individualism or not, be able to recognize them as a person. That goes a lot further than just trying to. But anyways, small, yeah. So I guess that's all I have to add, really.
Okay, awesome.
I agree.
Yeah, and I'm rethinking some of my libertarian orthodoxy, which I'm not going to get into here, but maybe I'll write about it.
They don't know who Alexander Spooner is. Just
I know. I've been a card carrying ANCAP for 13 years, so I'm rethinking things ideologically, which it's always a tough process to go through, and we have to remember that especially for people who are predisposed to wanting the government to fix their problems rather than seeing the government for kind of what it is, the creator of most of the problems. And then when they try to fix them, it just creates more.
And a lot of this too is just programming.
Mm-hmm.
The people have allowed themselves to think one way. And like you said, it's going to take time, but we need to consider that, the job that we have in front of us, especially as communications, is, to deprogram what people have been fed. Their thought, it's going to be, it can be good, but it's also going to be different and difficult sometimes.
We need to come up with those free market solutions for whatever the problem is government is trying to answer, whether it's healthcare, whether it's schooling. I've gotten on conservatives because I've been in politics for 30 years, right? And every year there's a new educational monster that the conservatives are trying to fight, and it's whack-a-mole. It was outcome-based education. It was I don't know. It's been critical race theory. It's been all these things. It's like, why are you handing your kids over to government? That's my answer. So, and Rebecca, as a homeschooler, you've got answers you can give on that. But there are free market solutions to these problems, that the government is trying to solve. And so we just need to get better at that.
All right, great. Well, I think we can leave it there. Marianne, do you have any parting words?
I want everybody who is watching this, listening to this, to get ready to rock and roll with us, because we have some big, ambitious plans, and we need every hand on deck.
Totally. Volunteers and money, man. That's what we need, especially volunteers. People. Don't stop donating, but man, if you have time on a weekend this summer to stand in a booth and just talk to people and give them literature and stuff. I know it's hot and I know you get sweaty and you would rather be at your kid's soccer game or whatever, but this is a big deal.
It can be really encouraging too,
Yeah.
though, because you'd be surprised how many people agree
Yeah.
with you once you start
Yeah,
talking
it's
to them.
crazy. So many people like not ready to join the party, but total fellow travelers. So we got to get them in our funnel as well. Rebecca, anything from you?
Yeah.
No, I think that, you know, I'm feeling really positive about the future. And like I said, I'm eager to just kind of hit the ground running. And that's what I want to see. But the volunteers, definitely, like, I have people in mind. I'm like, we've got these jobs, let's just go and do them, you know, and overcome this. So let's go.
All right, great. Well, thank you both for taking the time tonight. Marianne, we will talk soon. And Rebecca too. I'm sure we'll talk on the phone tomorrow because we
Yep.
And Rebecca, we need to talk too.